For over a month now, we have been reflecting upon the God of the desperate. Drawing upon the life of David, I have spoken about how God comes to the aid of the desperate, highlighting a few points in my last two episodes. In my last two talks, I said that a Christian can be desperate. He or she can come to a point of desperation. Then I also said that God comes to the help and aid of the desperate person. Now, looking at the life of David, looking at the ascendancy and the downward graph of David, I said that God communicates with the desperate and God also compensates the desperate. When I said God compensates with the desperate, I said that God compensates on the basis of principle and His plan, and not necessarily on the basis of proportionality. And I also said that God communicates with the desperate. That's when He comes close to the person who is going through a troubled time. And the text for those two talks have been primarily the initial part of 1 Samuel chapter 22. Of course, I have taken you through a few chapters beginning with 1 Samuel 16. But then we have looked at chapter 22, the initial part of 22. Then we have an intervening episode where King Saul executes the priest at Nob. Now he thinks that the priests at Nob have colluded with David. They've conspired against Saul. They've facilitated the escape of David from the grab of Saul, and which is why he's angry with them and he's executing them, eliminating them from the face of the earth. And during the time we see that a priest by name Abiathar, who escapes the grasp of Saul, and he has come to David. And now David assures Abiathar that he will be safe with him. So far we have seen that God is the God of the desperate because He compensates and He communicates. Now the question is, Abiathar and the 400 men who are with David, they might be safe. At least that's what David says to Abiathar. But now the question to the reader is, what about their survival? What about their sustenance? How would these 400 plus men and David survive and live? This is where we come to the initial part of 1 Samuel 23. This is where we see that the God of the desperate not only compensates, He not only communicates, but He also cares. He cares for the people who are going through turbulent times in their lives. He cares for the desperate. Now, when we think about God's care for the desperate, something that comes to our mind is the miraculous care. That God cares for people through a miraculous means, through something that is supernatural, through something that is paranormal, through something that is beyond natural. That's true. God has taken care of His people miraculously. For example, God has taken care of the people of Israel, the Israelites in the wilderness journey. He has provided them manna. And God has taken care of His prophet Elijah. He has used a crow to feed the prophet with bread and meat. That's very true, and God does miracles, and He is a God of miracle. But here in the text, God is not using any miraculous method or means. He is only using something that is very natural, very normal, very mundane, something that is an everyday incident, and He is taking care of David and his men. There are three things that I want to bring to your attention as to how God takes care of David and his men. Number one, God presents an opportunity to David. If you see in verse 1, we see that David was told, or he was informed, that the Philistines are looting Keilah, the threshing floor of Keilah. Now, looting, war, aggression is something that is very, very normal. That is an everyday incident in the ancient culture. Whether or not it is justified is another question. But war, loot, plunder, aggression is something that's very, very normal. So God is using this normal event of his time. So David is told that the Philistines are looting Keilah, looting the threshing floor of Keilah, the grain, the foodstuff, the food grain on which the people of Keilah would have lived. Philistines are now taking away. That is presentation. God is presenting an opportunity from a mundane event, from an everyday event. And at that point, David is inquiring of God, asking whether or not he should go down to Keilah and attack the Philistines. Okay, he is inquiring. Right at this moment, when God has presented with the opportunity, the second thing God does is he also prepares David and his men for this opportunity. Now God is telling David when he inquired, go down and attack the Philistines because I will give them to your hand. God is adding one more word, saying go down and attack Keilah and save Keilah. The aspect of salvation, saving. And when he communicates with his men, saying that let's go down and attack the Philistines, his people are dissuading him. His people are saying, look, this is going to be a dangerous proposition. It's going to be disastrous because we are already in Judah and we are afraid, perhaps because of Saul and his army. And it will be even more difficult to go down and attack the Philistines in Keilah. Okay, so David again inquires of God, shall I go down or not? And God says, go down because I will hand them over to you. So God not only presents an opportunity, God also prepares David for the opportunity. God prepares, at least if we look at the text, God prepares David in three different ways. First, mentally, because his people are dissuading him, saying that we are already afraid. But God is preparing him mentally, saying that I will give you success, so you go. That's mental aspect. God is also preparing him morally. Perhaps because Philistines are the aggressors here. So the people of Keilah, Keilah means citadel, in spite of their security, the secure, inhabitation, they are going to suffer already they are suffering at the hand of the Philistines. So the Philistines are the aggressors. And David is being told by God to go and save Keilah. So that is morally, because Philistines are the aggressors. And perhaps the third one is theologically or spiritually. Remember that fighting the Philistine is something that God mandated Saul. God said to Samuel that I am choosing Saul because he will fight against the Philistines and he will save my people. And you see that in 16 and 17, when David comes onto the scene, he also fights a Philistine champion. Okay, and now in 15, the king of Israel, that is Saul, is rejected, and therefore this spiritual theological mission is now devolving upon David, or it is transferred to David. God is transferring that mission and responsibility to David, saying that you can fight the Philistines and save anybody, whether they are people of Judah, people of Israel, or people of Keilah. So God is preparing David mentally, morally, and spiritually. So I said, God presents an opportunity from an everyday event. God prepares David for that opportunity, and God provides success. So when David and people go and fight, they inflict the Philistines heavily, they defeat them, and David and his men come away with plunders. They come away with booty, the livestock. It's not that David has not come away with any other thing, but the narrator is particular in mentioning the livestock, perhaps to suggest or to connect between David's present status and the shepherding experience. So God is caring for the desperate by presenting an opportunity and by preparing David for the opportunity and by providing success. My dear friends, in all this you would see that David has used one of his core competence. If you look at in chapter 16, we read several things about David's core competence. First one, he is a very articulate man. The second one is he is an accomplished musician. And the third one is he is a brave warrior. And all these aspects of core competence have been put to use at one point or the other. Right at this moment, he is employing warrior's skill, or he is playing the role of a warrior. So David is using his core competence. David is not sitting idle. He is not passive. He is active in employing his core competence. My dear friends, during this pandemic, I understand that a lot of trouble has come upon people. People have lost their jobs, unemployment rising, and you have dire needs at home. There are several needs unmet. Bare minimum needs are unmet. And during this time, the question arises, what next? What's in store for us? Perhaps God is speaking to you today that why don't you sit down and recall or re-examine your core competence? Revitalize your core competence. As you sit down and revitalize and recall your core competence, God is going to present the opportunity and prepare you and provide you success. You can't sit idle. You can't be passive. You need to be active in employing one of your core competence, or maybe several of your core competence. But be assured of this fact that God is going to present, prepare, and provide you success. May God come to you today with the assurance that you need to prepare with your core competence as God comes to you with opportunities where God's opportunity and your core competence will meet, and you will have a better tomorrow. You will have a better future. May God bless you today as you sit down and reflect upon these words.